GM. What up?
GM.
GM Chads.
Chad, it's been a pretty relaxing last 24 hours in the THORChain world, or what?
He had much to do but nothing.
Yeah, I didn't see anything happen.
It was actually we'll get into the detail of it, but it was a tricky one. It was very obscure and took us quite a while to pin it down.
Yeah, definitely could go through some of the details on that once we get into it. It'll be cool.
Just wait a minute or two here for people to hop in.
Sorry, so lost my earbuds real sec. 1 sec.
Hashtag release the yields.
It's coming. It's coming. We'll get into it.
And hashtag release protocol on liquidity too.
Let's go.
Yeah, so now that we're actually on 1.98, then all those should be in the code base and like ready to turn on, right? Now that we're actually on 1.98.
I think he dropped off. Looks like he's reconnecting as speaking.
Yeah.
There we go. You there, Chad?
Earbuds working, and then my Mac picked up on the earbuds and like stole them from my phone, and now I can't get it back up on my.
There you go. It's working now.
Loud and clear. So Cow was asking with 1.98 now single-sided yield and POL, it's like already there in the code base, just waiting to be activated, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. There are a couple like small bugs to iron out, but nothing like all that big of a deal. We could probably just launch without fixing them because they're not that significant. But at least to my knowledge, at least. So I think we're getting pretty close to being able to launch a feature, and when we do, we'll put like a cap on it, as we like to do for major new features. We'll put a small cap on it just to kind of test the waters first, make sure everything's behaving the way that we expect. There's no kind of like issues, whatever. And then as we feel more comfortable and more confident, we'll kind of up that cap and allow more and more yield to come in, savers to come in and get their single-sided yield.
So it should actually be possible. Has anyone re-entered the Bitcoin Savers Vault? Because that's what caused this bug in the first place. It should be possible to enter now, right?
No, I think it's actually still possible to enter. I think we just fixed the issue that caused the problem. But I'm not sure if anybody's actually tried to like enter since the network went back online. So I'm actually not sure if anybody's tried.
So also as far as caps and like limiting it will be just Bitcoin starting out.
No, it'll be enabled for any gas asset, I think. So any the primary asset for per chain. Um, the POL will not be enabled for all those chains. The POL will only be enabled maybe for one or two chains possibly, and so you'll be able to get some savers deployed in each one of those pools to start. And so that's the cap is how we place it is the cap is based upon the POL itself, like how much capital does the POL have to, how much room does it have to deploy to the various pools, and that's going to be capped at some number. And over time, we can increase that. So as the POL is able to have more capital, it can kind of like deploy more rune into the pools, which causes the centralization to go down, which causes more openings for new savers to kind of enter. And so initially, the POL will probably be turned off entirely, and we'll just allow the synths to grow out to what they would normally do and as they've been doing for months. And then once that's happened, then we can enable the POL to start deploying a little bit of capital into the pools and make sure everything looks good, everything's behaving like I think it is going to be should behaving, and then over time, kind of increase that number.
So do we want to start off talking about the consensus failure? Yeah, I'm curious to hear your take on what happened, and just first off, kudos on getting this fix out so quick. I think it's the quickest recovery from any kind of major network outage that's happened to my knowledge. So about 20 and a half hours from the fail to being up and trading enabled and everything fully operational. So great job on that. Yeah, let's hear a little bit more about exactly what happened and how you guys found the fix. And I'm curious about that.
Yeah, the funny thing is that this one was probably, at least in my opinion, the most difficult one to fix. It was the most difficult one to track down to figure out what the actual problem is because so the problem we got into from a high level perspective is what's called a consensus failure, right? And that basically just means that the different validators of the network have a different states, right? There's some sort of minute change or difference between one validator to the next. So they don't really agree with each other, so they all just kind of pause and wait till they get some sort of consensus of what the state is. And whenever you get that failure, it's actually a really hard problem to solve because all Cosmos tells us is that like the data is slightly different from each other, but doesn't give us any pointers to know what data, which transaction caused it. Like you get really no insight. There's no error message here. There's no thing that lets you know about a place to look, right? And so that's always a very difficult situation because you're just like, okay, there's some code that happened somewhere in the code that caused this issue, and it just becomes like a very difficult thing to kind of try to pinpoint where it is. And in this particular case, the thing that caused it was probably the most difficult thing to find that we've seen in the past. But we in part got the chain up so quickly just because we have the kind of the tools we didn't have in the earlier when the chain was less mature. We have tools that we have put together that allow us to do this more quickly and more efficiently from our previous experience and such, and building out the maturity of like the maintenance of this chain in a sense. So, so here's what the bug was. It was kind of really fascinating. So somebody added deposited savers into the savers thing for Bitcoin, and that's what actually triggered the consensus failure. And so why that happened is because when you deposit layer one Bitcoin, before it can be deposited into the savers part, it has to be swapped from Bitcoin into a synthetic Bitcoin, and then the second part of it is being deployed into the savers bucket pool thing, whatever. And so it went to go and do a swap, and after it does the swap, it's actually doing an add, but before it does the add, it has to do a swap first, right? So it has to generate a new kind of transaction, and then once it's done with that transaction of swapping to the layer synth one, it's got to generate a new transaction internally to do the add, right? The add portion of it. And in this case, it has to generate a memo, just like anything else, right? And so within that memo is an affiliate fee, which in this case was 0. And the bug was that instead of putting the value of 0 in the memo, it put the pointer of the variable into the memo, right? And if you don't know what a pointer is just basically like the location in the memory where this value is being stored. Right? It's not the value itself; it's like where you can find the value. Like it's not so much the car; it is the parking spot that the car is in, right? And so each individual validator will have a different, like within their own memory, will have a different location of where this value is stored, but the value is the same across all the different all the different validators. And so the memo was just putting in basically the pointer instead of the value into the memo, in which case the memo becomes slightly different from each individual validator. And so the reason why we didn't see this problem in all of our testing before is because when you're adding savers and it does that swap, if there's nothing in the swap queue, then it'll swap it and add it to the savers in a single transaction, in a single block, right? It doesn't have to store anything to the actual blockchain itself. It's all just to be done like in memory immediately now versus being spread out across multiple blocks. So we never saw this because we never had a swap queue on StageNet or on testnet to actually create this scenario that we're now in. We only saw it once we were in mainnet, which mainnet had like I think it had 6 or 7 different items in the swap queue at the time, which caused that the swap be like delayed a block, which means that the memo had to be sent to the chain to be stored on the chain. In which case, that memo had a slightly different number for all the different validators, causing the consensus failure. Does that make sense? It's like a highly technical, complex thing that I'm trying to describe in a somewhat non-technical way.
Yeah, I thought that was a good explanation. I'm wondering how you guys actually caught that issue.
Yeah, we actually we use a methodology that we actually just came up for this purpose. And so what we do is we make some small modification to the code, and then we sync like mainnet, right? And then we do it again a second time, and then if the 2 times we expect them both to have app hash or consensus failures, but it gives you like when you have a consensus failure, it tells you like your app hash, which is basically like the checksum of like or the summary sort of or checksum of the data of that block. And so if we fix the issue, if the change we made avoids the issue, then we can know that whatever change we made is affecting the result, right? And so just through a series of like trial and error of like, okay, let's disable the begin part of the block, let's disable the end part of the block, let's disable this handler or that handler, or let's take this particular manager of the swap queue and let's take. So we just started to like eliminate things slowly and through a process of trial and elimination, eventually finding the precise function that was causing the actual problem. And then once you had that precise function, we just look through the code and there's the bug right there. We should be casting this value to an uint before actually casting to a value to an integer before putting it into the string of the memo. Does that make sense? Because I'm not sure if it makes sense to me, but I'm a nerd, so I'm not sure if it makes sense to the non-technical people.
A little lost,
Yeah.
but it makes me think you're even smarter. So that's all I need to know.
It was a difficult one to find, but we eventually got our hands on it. And now we actually have a new methodology of like if we were ever to see a problem like this in the future, we have a new methodology of finding the issue, of like defining the issue, which is really nice to have because failure is like the worst issue you can have in some sense because it's just such a black box of like, hey, there's a problem somewhere in the code somewhere, and you're just like, okay, how do I find that? Then it's very difficult to track down.
Yeah, well, definitely huge props to you and the rest of the team just for doing all that hard work and figuring it out so quickly, and just the level of professionalism and getting everything sorted so quickly. So,
oh, and by the way, one more thing, like when we had the failure, our first thought was there's something in version 98, right? Because it was just released like an hour earlier, so like maybe that's the issue. There's some code change in 98. That wasn't even the case. It was like months ago. So you couldn't even look at recent changes because it's not necessarily a recent change that caused the issue. Isn't that funny?
Yeah, interesting that it can just be kind of just dormant in there and have no idea that it could happen until you know that memo goes through and it's uploading to the same thing on all the nodes. So
Yeah, we actually had the one other time we had a consensus failure like a while back was from a bug that was introduced in the code like 2.5 years ago, right? Like it was, but just never reached that particular code path until you know something happened and we decom one of the pools and all of a sudden that condition was met and then like that was the first time we had a failure like that.
yeah, it's great to see the coordination on all the nodes though. They updated so quickly. That patch was just released pretty late last night on East Coast time, and about early this morning everything's fully back up. So trading LP actions are available. Everything is back to business on THORChain. So looking good, looking good. If there's any like articles and things that need to be corrected, just be sure to send that to us so we can get those updated to make sure all the coverage is accurate and up to date. So I'm be working on that a little bit just to make sure that all the information that's out there in the media is real news, factual.
Yeah, I had to look through all the media and look for anything that is incorrect.
I don't think there's that much that was incorrect. There was just some articles that were going out about it. So it's good to have it like, all right, like the situation is over. Everything is all good. So
Yep.
Good to issue those corrections. So yeah, anything else exciting about the consensus failure? I mean, like when these things happen, it's an opportunity to just make the network that much better. Now that we have these new processes, it just makes things even safer for the next time that something like this could potentially happen. So
yeah, this kind of stuff, like it can always happen when you're actively developing, right? And even when you're doing passively, like just bug fixing, technically it can happen there as well. But it's more likely to happen in like obviously larger code changes and such. And so like we obviously want to keep pushing the network and keep innovating and keep adding significant features. Like in this particular case, it was because we wanted to add this savers feature, right? And the ability to like get layer one yield on just Bitcoin or just whatever asset you want. And so in the process of doing so, we had a bunch of code changes, and we introduced this particular bug, which had to get ironed out. So it's a normal thing. Even like with our recent, AVAX was paused recently just because there was an edge case that happened that caused the network to double spend a swap or an outbound transaction. Like whenever you introduce like major new components of code to a code base, it's very common and very natural to have bugs and stuff that need to be kind of ironed out over the first like few months of the feature or whatnot. And so like whenever we add these major new features like this, or possibly like lending in the future, or possibly whatever order books, maybe, I don't know, whatever it might be, like you always have risk of having bugs and issues that you gotta work out. But that's just part of the game, right? That's to be expected.
Right, and the important part is that funds aren't at risk through any of this. Even though there's consensus fail, it doesn't mean that vaults are insolvent or there's any kind of risk there. So it's just hardening the actual logic of THORChain itself. So it's positive here. I brought up Prime
Right.
Directive too. He requested to come up. So hey, Prime.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep.
Real quick, I just wanted to share something. Yesterday when this whole thing happened, the bug. I have to commend you. It's not just, hey, you guys are really smart. Good job fixing it fast. It's the communication around what happened from 3 different sources just on Twitter. I was so well informed from beginning, middle to end of that throughout the process. I had an experience with a fellow internet friend on a random Discord server. They're like, "Oh, hey, Prime, what's going on with THORChain? I was trying to trade some Doge. It's like not working or something." I was like, "Oh, here's what happened." They're on top of it, and then like an hour later, I was able to send him another message. hey, it looks like they figured it out. You know, everything's going to be fine. He's like, well, it's still not working. And I was able to tell him, like, well, nodes need to update, just hang in there and everything should be fine soon. An hour or two ago, I was able to send him a message like, hey, you're good to go, man. And that is awesome. The layers, the calmness of the communication, and the fact that it was from 3 sources on Twitter. That's, I cannot put into words how much confidence that speaks into the market. Like, so let's not just overlook that, even though it's important that you guys are all super nerds and all that. Excellent job on your internal communication and getting that all out. So thank you.
Well, thank you for saying that. I think that's something like that, especially Gavin and FamiliarCow and other people are kind of pushing is to kind of improve or mature the communications aspect of the protocol, which is just a natural thing to happen as we get further down the road of this project.
It's pretty well oiled at this point. Everyone, knows their role and what needs to be done. So, it's all really smooth all around from this side of things. And happy to provide the communications updates and things like that, because it's important for the community to know exactly what's going on. That that everyone here on this side is calm and collected, and things are progressing as normal. So, and now that we're back to normal, it's just another day. It's 20 and a half hours of downtime, and now back to business. So, thanks for your comments. All right, moving on. So we want to talk about Savers and POL. Well, let's get to it. We could start with Savers vaults. So Savers are live. You can actually deposit, I guess, in any pool, right? Because that's what you just said, Chad. I thought it was only Bitcoin, but you could deposit any asset as
I think it's just
single-sided liquidity.
I think it's just the gas assets.
Yes.
So Bitcoin, Ethereum, not Rune, not ERC20s, not random like BEP2 tokens, but like BNB, Doge, AVAX, Bitcoin, Ethereum, so forth and so on.
Small question, implementation question. When can you can just add to a Saver position with. So let's say you have a small amount of BTC in the Bitcoin pool, and you can you add, say, like every month into a Bitcoin pool, and that just gets added into your position in a Savers vault?
Yeah, you can do that as many times as you want, and you can withdraw, as many times as you want. Obviously, not double spending or anything, but like you can take away half your position and then take away another half, another half, another half, or you want to add a bunch more later, like. Arbitrarily, you could enter and exit as you want. Although we might put a limitation on, like, you can't enter if you exited within the last 24 hours, something like that, just so people don't kind of thrash the thing or whatever. But that may not be even necessary, to be honest with you. But yeah, you can basically enter and exit whenever you feel like it.
Yeah, I thought that's very necessary, just because of the swaps that need to take place, entering and exiting, converting to Rune, and then depositing into the Savers vault. Like there's a little bit of slip taken out of there. So yeah, I wonder if that's a necessary thing to put in there.
I suspect that like the kind of user who would want this feature is like more of less of like a degen or like mercenary capital type of person, and would be more of like a long-term hodler or like institution, or like somebody who is kind of more has a long-term view on their position in crypto, rather than like trying to chase some crazy yields across blah blah blahs, whatever. So I expect people won't naturally just enter and leave. It just doesn't seem to make a whole lot much sense. But yeah,
Cal, you bring up a good point. I think having to deal with the slippage, because there's a couple of swaps happening on both directions. Like that's kind of a natural slowdown of how many it just lowers the incentive to just jump right in and jump right out. So that should help naturally attract some longer term people, I would think.
Yeah, and that's the only way that you can that you can get less. If you put a bunch of Bitcoin in and you come out and you have less Bitcoin than you started with, It's only because you entered recently and then you exited very recently, and you paid slip fees, both on the way in and the way out, in addition to like the outbound fee and gas fees. And like, if you calculate all the fees together, like you could come out with less Bitcoin than you started, but that just means you have to stay in the pool for X number of whatever it is, before like you're in a net positive, and then from that point on, just like number goes up.
Can we just walk through, just for like complete clarity? I know we kind of did this last week. Cow, you had a great explanation, and you've been working on those diagrams. But maybe we can just go through like step by step what exactly is happening on the back end, from deposit to earning yield.
Yeah, go for it, Kyle. You want to keep up with that, the infographic, and if you want to like put
Yeah,
up the
let me
tweet here or
tweet it
whatever,
out
like
first.
link
Yeah,
the tweet here in the
I didn't tweet it out, so give me a second if you want
yeah,
to
yeah.
start on it while I tweet it out.
While he's doing that, like I put a tweet in the top here from Eric Voorhees that I just loved, because it just puts it in like a really good light, or a very good way of thinking about it. And he's like comparing the native BDC idea to basically what attracted everybody into like BlockFi and have like millions of users. And but like this one has, as Eric was saying, like it has like, no intermediaries, no KYC, no borders, all open source. Like it is everything that we wish BlockFi would be, but now it's on THORChain.
Yeah, I love it. Such a killer. That's definitely a tweet for the THORChain wall of the history books. But yeah, that kind of thought is something that just gets me, especially recently. It's just so exciting when I think about THORChain. Is like I think of it as just going down the list of like all of these core things that centralized entities have like taken from crypto, being like, oh, like you want to trade, well, come to a centralized exchange. Oh, you want yield, whatever, like come to BlockFi, whatever. And it's such a spectacle to watch, like THORChain kind of tackling these hit products, right? Like the things people are actually doing in crypto, and just like one by one kind of being like, nope, we're taking that back to like the decentralized world. And that concept just really excites me.
Yeah, I remember I was talking to a guy, and I probably shouldn't say which, but he's from a BlockFi like company. I won't say which one, but like, and I said to him like, hey, have you read about this whole like THORFi stuff we've been talking about? And this feature is like one of the features of THORFi actually. And he says, oh no, what's that? And I explained to him like, what THORFi is, briefly. And he said to me, I was like laughing my head. He said like, oh, so you're doing everything that we're doing, but decentralized. And his face just went like white. Like he was just like, oh god. I was just like, yeah, basically, sure, yeah.
That's the thing. It's like the infrastructure wasn't quite there to really flesh out the full vision of doing this in the crypto world. It took so long, like the original vision of crypto was that, ever since 5-10 years ago. And it's kind of like taken until this convergence of technologies that like THORChain uses, and like other developments in other areas, of course, too, but kind of like allowing them all to come together and really build from the ground up, like the way what we all kind of had the vision for all along. And it just all kind of comes together. The next one being probably, you said with THORFi, like after this, be like lending and borrowing. That's kind of like the next big hit product, right? And it's just like, once again, it's just taking back something that's kind of been siloed into centralized entities for crypto, and porting it back over to like the actual decentralized world.
Yeah, especially for assets like Bitcoin. Like there is no Bitcoin loan out there. I mean, maybe on one of the Bitcoin side chains, but like it's just structural. I think what we're doing here is just structurally different than anything else. And even the lending design itself, which we're not going to get into right now because we other topic, but like it is structurally a very different lending design, and with very different set of attributes than everything else in the industry. And so it's going to appeal less to the degen type of like person, and more towards the person, the long term hodler, the institution like that has a much more capital in that realm than in the degen realm that we're kind of like familiar with and used to in the DeFi world. But like one of the things like I'm most excited, or one of the things I'm really excited about for the savers, is that when people deploy their Bitcoin into the pool and then take on a savers position, they're adding a bunch of Bitcoin into that pool, or Ethereum or Doge or whatever, and they're adding by the asset, but they're not adding the rune side. And so inherently, what that does is that the pool becomes off balance. There's too much Bitcoin, not enough rune, and so the market, the arbitrage bots, which we'll probably get into in a second from the graphic that Cal put up, will create buy pressure to buy up rune to kind of level off the pool. And so like as more savers like dive in, it's going to create buy pressure on the rune asset until it basically hits its like cap, like of the synth cap. So it's just gonna be like, I'm expecting that a bunch of people are going to jump in with savers, and then it should create a good amount of, I don't know how much, but just some amount of buy pressure on the rune asset, which I'm excited to see what the result of that is.
Yeah, let's go into the graphic a little bit. So hopefully everyone can see. I pinned the tweet on top of the space here. I'll try and put it up in the YouTube video too, so you can check it out and follow along. It's in two different columns. The left column goes into what happens when a user goes to add Bitcoin into a Savers vault, and then the right column, going top to bottom, is what happens when that user withdraws from the Savers vault after earning some yield. So yeah, let's just run it down a little bit, and we'll explain what's going on. So some assumptions that come with this. So first is the rune price and the Bitcoin price. So this model assumes that 10,000 rune is 1 Bitcoin on both sides, so that there's no price change between the two. You could recalculate it based on a different rune price and Bitcoin price. And all swaps in this, it's a 0.1% slippage fee. So it assumes a Bitcoin depth of about 1,000 BTC. So yeah, those are the assumptions, and then obviously like there's some underlying knowledge that there's an equal value of Bitcoin and rune in the liquidity pool. So the Bitcoin rune pool is at a market price when compared to other markets. So there's an equal value of the Bitcoin in the pool as there is rune in the pool, and that will always be maintained because of the arbitrageurs on the network. So to get started, the user has 1 Bitcoin and deposits it into the Bitcoin pool, and it gets swapped to rune. So that 1 Bitcoin goes in, and then 9,990 rune comes out because that 0.1% slippage. So there's slightly less rune comes out the other end, almost all of it. And then that same amount of rune goes right back into the pool. So the pool ends up with a net position of +1 Bitcoin, and then there's no actual change in the amount of rune that's in the pool. But then the pool issues that synthetic Bitcoin asset. So there's a liability on the pool of slightly less than 1 Bitcoin. So there's another slip gets calculated there. So it's 0.998 synthetic Bitcoin. So now you can think about the price of rune and Bitcoin as in a relationship to the pool. If so, the price in external markets is the same, right? But on THORChain, rune's price increased against Bitcoin because now that there's 1 extra Bitcoin in the pools, but there's no extra rune in the pools. So an arbitrager makes the trade in the opposite direction. So because there's about 1 extra Bitcoin in the pool, about half of the arbitrager would deposit rune into the pool and swap for Bitcoin, extracting slightly less value than 1 Bitcoin. So it approximately balances out the pool to be about plus half of 1 Bitcoin and slightly less than half 1 Bitcoin's worth of rune. So that balances out the pool price to be the same as other marketplaces. So now that the pool price is balanced, the net pool positions is approximately half a Bitcoin, and then about slightly less than 5,000 rune, which would be about half a Bitcoin in this situation. So now the pool price is balanced, and then that synthetic Bitcoin gets locked into the vault, and some slips incurred. So about 0.997 BTC actually makes it into the vault. And the net result is the user now has a vault position in the Bitcoin Savers vault. There is now an additional liability on the pool of 0.997 BTC, because that's what's deposited into the vault. And then there's a net rune buy pressure because the arbitrage re-movement back to market price is slightly less than the original movement out of the market price. So then just think about the user. They have their position in the vault, and they keep it in there for a number of years, or who knows, whatever the yield is. They earn 5% after an undetermined amount of time. I don't know how long this would be, but let's say that this user earns about 5%. So 5% over 0.997 BTC, that's about 1.047 BTC. And then the user removes that from the vault, so they get 0.1% less. So they get slightly less out of the Savers vault. They still gained about 0.046 BTC out of this. That BTC gets burned, and then Rune gets removed from the pool. So this is about the opposite of what happens when you enter the pool, obviously. So the synthetic BTC gets burned, and then Rune gets removed from the pool. So you have slightly more than 10,000 Rune being removed from the pool, and then that Rune goes right back into the pool and gets swapped for Bitcoin, and then that gets sent to the user. So because of this, the net pool positions, there's a little bit more than 1 Bitcoin removed from the pool and no net Rune removed from the pool. So in order to counteract that, the arbitrager to balance the prices on THORChain would deposit some Bitcoin into the pool to sell to get Rune out, and the net result would be about slightly more than half a Bitcoin removed from the pool, and then slightly more than half a Bitcoin's worth of Rune removed from the pool to balance the net outflow, to be balanced between the two assets. So the net result is that the user no longer has that vaulted position. The synth is burned, so the pool liabilities have decreased by that same amount. And then there's a slight net Rune sell pressure because they end up removing Bitcoin from the pool, so that throws the prices off, and the arbitrage movement is slightly less than the original movement. So there's a slight net Rune sell pressure when a saver removes from the pool. So hopefully that explains like the dynamics of how there's Rune buy and sell pressure when you enter and exit a Savers vault. I've been trying to understand this for a while, and making this diagram really helped me understand just the price dynamics of what happens when you add and remove from the vault. So hopefully this helps everyone, make an informed decision that it's healthy for the THORChain network to have this active, and just increases everyone's general understanding of how the feature works, and then how arbitrage is affected too.
Yeah, really well explained. I think this definitely helped me personally have everything click. One question, just to clarify, is like, so on the synth BTC going into the vault, or the other way around, that part has a slippage fee. Is that fee, like, that's not an actual slippage, correct? It's just a fee being charged basically just to help make the pools profitable. Like, that fee is just going to the pools, but it's not actually like a slippage of any kind, right? Am I thinking about that correctly?
Yeah, Chad, could you comment on that? I believe it. So it's not actually slippage, but I believe it just it calculates what a slippage cost would be of entering that pool, and then it is charged like a slippage fee, but it's not a slippage fee because there's no actual swap being incurred against the pool. It's just it's fees that go into the pool. So I believe that's how it works.
Is a slip. So like when you enter from BDC, layer 1 BDC to the saver, where you're depositing a synthetic Bitcoin, I think in reality what's actually happening in the code base is that it's actually performing a double swap, because you're performing a swap from layer 1 BDC to Rune, and then you're doing another swap from Rune to synthetic Bitcoin, right? So that's actually two different swaps happening, and each of those swaps has its own swap fee that's associated with that.
Yeah, I'm actually talking about the next step, like number 4 in the diagram. Just taking the synthetic BTC that at that point that's already been minted, right? So it's already gone through a double swap, but then locking that into the vault, that incurs another slip fee. Is that right?
No, once the synthetic is actually minted, it's just put into let's call it Cosmos module, but like it's just put into a vault. There's no actual slippage fee from going from the synthetic into the vault. Like that has no fee to it.
Okay, sorry, that's just an error on my part. Then, because I for a while we were talking about there being a fee to enter and exit the vault, so I was assuming that's what it was. So it's only four fees going in and out. Then just a double swap, right?
So it would actually, using the numbers in the example, it would actually be the 0.998. It wouldn't drop to the 0.997 in that last step.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. So it's just 2 swaps on the way in and then 2 swaps on the way out. And those are the only fees. Well, with the exception of like the outbound fee and the gas fee when you're withdrawing from the network, but those are the only actual fees being associated.
Great. So more Bitcoin then. Good news.
So if you like, just to make this thing one more layer of complexity, just to melt minds a little bit more, once you add in the POL to this whole calculation, right? Because Kyle was saying how when somebody's depositing synthetic Bitcoin, they're creating a buy pressure on the Rune asset, and when someone's withdrawing, they're creating sell pressure on the Rune asset, and whatever direction they're going. That once the synths have gone to like the cap or close to the cap, and the POL starts to kick in and does what the POL does, it's the one that's providing the opposite side. So like if somebody deploys 1 Bitcoin into savers and creates 1 Bitcoin worth, technically it'd be like half a Bitcoin worth of buy pressure on an asset. The protocol own liquidity is coming in with that Rune, and so they're selling the Rune to that counter position. So it's effectively, it depends on where the target utilization is that the POL is targeting for, but let's just say it's 50% of the pool depth, and then it becomes like for every $1 of buy pressure that entering the savers, Bitcoin savers does, the POL creates $1 of sell pressure, and so it just becomes like a level thing. So it doesn't really matter if you're entering the pool or leaving the pool. There's no effect to the Rune price. But if you were to do something like instead of 50%, you would do like 67%. It'd be like for every $1 Bitcoin added, it would cause $2 of buy pressure on the Rune asset, and the same in the reverse if you would go the reverse direction.
Yeah, I didn't even think about POL being added into this before, but you're completely right, because thinking about it, it's kind of like the protocol is taking on that partially some of that arbitrage's role of adding Rune back into the pools after the price is imbalanced once the double swap is made. So yeah, that's really interesting that the POL balances out the dynamics here. Like the POL is kind of what plays that third role.
Right, and we won't see the POL actually in action for the beginning of this at least. And so beginning will just be general market movements, but eventually the POL will kick in and will start to become the counterbalance to everything.
So just to really simplify for a second, so this is what's happening until the synth cap, the normal synth cap that like we already have, is hit, and then anything above that, because the synth cap is already maxed out, you can't just mint more synths. So then in that case, that's where the PLL is going to kick in. The reserve is going to take the Rune side. So basically, in this example, if 1 BTC is coming in, it would essentially be just under half a BTC worth of Rune that's coming in from the reserve from the POL side, and then owning half of that position in terms of POL.
Yeah, so
or half of that value.
Yeah, the POL is literally acquiring. It's using its Rune reserves to acquire a position in both Rune and the other asset, whatever other asset is. So the network itself, as silly as it sounds, is actually acquiring Bitcoin and acquiring Ethereum and acquiring whatever asset these are. I assume it to be the vast majority to be Bitcoin because that's going to be the thing that everybody's going to be depositing into. Like less so Doge and less so Litecoin. Like probably not a lot of people are going to be doing that, but like vast majority of it's going to be Bitcoin or maybe even ETH. Maybe not ETH because there's a lot of places you can get ETH on ETH yield within the Ethereum ecosystem. So to me, there's less competition or more competition there. But like Bitcoin will probably be the biggest thing. So the network will start acquiring Bitcoin as part of this process.
And it's essentially by doing an asymmetrical add, like it's basically putting in the rune for LP units.
Correct. It's doing an asim add the POL is a dual-sided LP, but it only ever provides rune, and so it's putting in $1,000 a rune or something like this. Half of it gets sold into Bitcoin, so that's 50% in Bitcoin, 50% in rune, so $500 in one, $500 in the other, and that's just kind of dynamically buying and selling based upon the demand of the market, right? So if more synth people come in, it's going to deposit and make a larger position. If synth people leave, it'll withdraw and make a smaller position. Or even if neither one of those things happen, and say just a regular LP, like say FamiliarCow's got an LP position in the Bitcoin pool, and say he leaves, then the synth solution will naturally increase, and then the POL will basically replace FamiliarCow in a matter of speaking. And if FamiliarCow comes in, doesn't have a position, and then he comes in, then the POL basically starts to leave, and the FamiliarCow takes the position or replaces the POL to some like whatever amount of value that he's coming in with. And so it's like not just about people interacting from a savers perspective, either adding savers or withdrawing savers, but it's also relative to price movements, like the Bitcoin price relative to Rune's price, and it's also relative to dual-side LPs. As they leave or as they enter, the POL will take the reverse position in a sense.
Yeah, that
I
makes
love how
sense.
all the dynamics kind of mesh together and play off each other and balance everything out. It's going to be super cool. And I also love that THORChain will be acquiring huge BTC position over this nice little bear market here. I think that's. I mean, I don't think anyone agrees that that's a negative thing, and I think that's going to be real nice to play out in a couple of years.
That's why we would. I said in the past, and I'm obviously I'm not sure until we actually see how the market reacts. But like, there's a non-zero potential that a lot of the dual-side LPs leave the network, and then they just become savers. In which case, the POL would kick in and do what it does, right? And that would just mean that like we would have that the majority of the dual side LP is basically the POL, maybe even the vast majority, and everybody else just wants takes on the less yield but less risk position of getting BTC on their BTC or F on their F, right? And that's a real potential outcome, which wouldn't be a bad thing actually.
Yeah, that brings up another important detail. So we're still at the yield is going to be half of the dual sided, correct?
Yes. So if you put in $100 into a pool today, and let's just say you came back later and you had like a 10% yield, instead of getting 10%, in a saver's position you would get only 5%, and that's kind of like a simple way to think about it. So because you're opting to only supply a single asset rather than two assets, and you're taking on less risk, and you're providing, in some sense, you're providing less value to the network, arguably. The yield should reflect that. The yield should reflect, what the risk that you're taking on. That's just generally how markets work in general. And so the dual LPs are going to take on a larger kind of yield because they're going to get half the yield that the savers people deposit, and the savers are going to keep the other half for themselves. And so the dual LPs are going to get a higher yield as a percentage than they are now. Whether or not they actually generate a higher yield or not is a different topic because as savers deposit, the pools get more full, in which case the incentive pendulum swings away from the pools and towards the nodes, so that less of the system income of the network goes towards the pools and more of it goes towards the nodes, right? So it's a multifaceted kind of like economics at play here, and it's kind of hard to reason about all the different cogs in the machine in a sense. But generally speaking, dual L sides will make a larger yield, like in terms of a percentage, and savers will make half their position, but then we'll see how the incentive pendulum kind of like pushes back and forth, and hopefully that creates more like buy pressure on the Rune asset, because now it's much more profitable to be a node, and to be a node you have to bond up Rune, so the value or the drive to buy Rune is obviously increased, which hopefully gets the node operators, maybe new node operators, to buy more Rune, which causes more buy pressure, which causes the bond to go up, which causes more space for the savers. Savers kick back in. Like this, there's a whole kind of like flywheel to it in some sense.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it also just part of that really makes sense is not only is the single-sided just taking the lower risk option, but by taking that, they're actually kind of directly increasing the risk of the dual-sided, right? Because they are pushing the synth utilization up, which means that the dual-sided LPs have more synth liability. So it kind of like makes sense that like they're doing an action that gives them low risk and actually increases the other side risk, which makes it seem extremely fair that they're taking on half of that.
Right, and I think part of the intent is that as the POL, so like the amount of risk that a dual LP has relative to synths is kind of like they're taking on a leverage Rune position, right? Depending upon if Rune's price outperforms or underperforms the asset, right? Whatever asset that might be. And so the amount of synths as a utilization of the pool relative to the depth of the pool itself, it kind of determines how much leverage there is there, right? So the POL itself is there to maintain that Rune utilization percentage, right? So it's there to deploy capital, and by doing so, it reduces the risk on the non-POL LPs, right? It's almost like, me and FamiliarCow and Chad THOReau, we have to eat, 100 hot dogs, right? And so that's a lot of hot dogs for 3 people to eat. And so the POL comes in and just says like, okay, I'll eat 30, right, or 50, or whatever the number would be, and then just makes it less of a problem for me and THOReau and Chad to like eat all these hot dogs, right? It's kind of a shitty analysis, but like,
yeah, 70 hot dogs, no problem.
70 is fine for us. But like, it's just the idea that like it's just taking on, it's just adding LPs so that the risk is spread out, right, with the amount of capital in the dual LP position. And so as the POL enters, it's it's spreading it out more, and so there's less and less risk on the regular people doing regular LP, like dual side LP. So it's the part that really kind of controls the risk for the LPs is not so much the POL itself in a sense. It's more of the utilization target that the POL takes, which for me, I'm like pushing that to be 50% of the pool depth. Like that's just to make sure that we don't have any net buy or net sell pressure on the Rune asset, and everything just kind of stays nice even keel, which is I think just better for the network. But like that's the thing. It's the synth cap itself, which controls the amount of risk that the LPs take on. All very complicated and hard to explain because it is complicated mathematics, and it's easier if I have like a spreadsheet to like show people the motion of the numbers in a sense. But trying to describe it just auditorily is a little bit difficult.
Yeah, I'll say that we're open for questions, so if people want to request to come up. There is one question in the comments here about whether you could add a just regular synth BTC to a Savers vault. So I don't believe that's currently possible, right? But will that be possible to just add and remove just regular synth BTC, or will it only be layer 1?
Yeah, right now it's only layer 1. The reason why that is because, at least from our position, we see synths as they're being utilized today as just an arbitrage tool, right? Which that's heavily what it's used for today. That's why the the capital capital efficiency is so high, and the amount of longevity, how long a synth is minted before it's burned, is generally very quick. So we don't see there's much use for that. So what we really want to see is just like driving layer one assets in. That being said, I'm not really opposed to allowing somebody just to deposit a synthetic Bitcoin into the pool, the vault, and then withdraw it later. But it just requires more code that just doesn't seem worth it for V1, to be honest with you. But if people really want to see that happen, I don't mind adding it.
Hey, Prime Directive, party back up.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Thanks for letting me jump in again. So here's it's a big question for me. I'm like, I got my fingers crossed here, but will there be a referral mechanism with the savers? Because like I have this huge fantasy of my favorite projects having like, Bitcoin savings powered by THORChain. Can we do this?
Yes, affiliate fee still works. I'm pretty sure. So I think I have to go back to the code and just verify it real quick. But from memory, and I hope I'm speaking correctly, but I'm pretty sure affiliate fee is still being respected. So if somebody wanted to build, and I know of somebody who's very well known and who's building a kind of like a wrapper project, that just kind of wraps around this feature and just supplies an easy mechanism for people to deposit and withdraw into Bitcoin saving position. Somebody could do that for sure and earn income.
Awesome. Free hot dog with every new savers account. Thank you, guys.
Yo, Finblow.
Just to follow up to that question, and then I have another question. But I remember there being some discussion about removing the requirement to have a memo for single-sided deposits. So if that functionality gets coded into THORnode, would it be possible to still earn an affiliate fee if somebody's making a deposit without a memo?
Yeah, good question. So that feature is not in the code yet. That's being worked on. I think Iridanis is working on that particular feature, which is massive, by the way, because this means that like you can contribute to this system without needing a custom wallet. You can just do it directly from like literally any wallet that holds Bitcoin. Or Ethereum or any asset for that matter, which is awesome. But to answer your question, no, because in order to get the affiliate fee, you need to have a memo that kind of describes who's earning the yield of this affiliate. So you would need, in Bitcoin's case, you would need a wallet that supports, an op return or like a memo, which most of them do not. And then you could earn your yield.
Gotcha, thanks. And then unrelated, but I just want to make sure I understand the timeline here. So as of today, folks can deposit single-sided, but am I correct? They're not earning yield yet, and that's got to get voted on by the nodes, as well as the protocol-owned liquidity feature for when the synth caps do get hit. That also has to be voted on by the nodes?
Yeah, I think we will probably do this. So you can enter the savings position right now, and it wouldn't do any good for you. So I wouldn't recommend people do it because just you'd be putting your Bitcoin in the network for no yield. But when it does, when it's time, when we feel like it's time to do so, we'll give it up to the node operators to do a symbolic vote. And by that it just means to vote to turn it on or off. But Mimir admin will actually be the thing that actually turns just respecting whatever the community voted for and turning it on itself. The reason why that's important that Mimir do it, just because if there's some sort of problem, the next day or whatever, we want to be able to have the Mimir admin to be able to disable the feature or pause the feature or whatever and fix it, and then carry on. If it's controlled by the nodes, then we would need to get a 2/3 majority of nodes to like vote in the other direction, which would just take 16, 18 hours or a day or whatever it is. And in situations where there's some sort of bug, we want to be able to respond as fast and as quickly as possible, stop whatever the problem is, and then set out a fix for it, and then carry on. So in the beginning, at least, I would like to maintain that the Mimir admin controls the feature in the beginning. and then eventually, once we feel like we've ironed out all the kind of rough edges of the new feature, we can go ahead and just MamiliarCow can just step back and Node just take over the thing. So same thing for the POL. We can vote on enabling it. My viewpoint is we'll probably have the Mimir control like the scaling of that, along with in coordination with the community, just so that we have the ability to scale it down very quickly if we need to if there's some sort of bug or exploit or like whatever happens, like we want to be able to respond as quickly and as fast as possible without incurring a significant loss to the rest of the protocol, meaning that like pausing the entire protocol just because this one feature got some sort of bug in it.
Gotcha. And I know you guys hate the when questions, but given that the code is there and everything, do you have any rough sense for when those two symbolic votes might happen?
I don't, to be honest with you. We have to come together as the core team along with Nine Realms and kind of a discussion of when we feel it's ready to kind of to start the vote. We'll post something in like the Discord and that main kind of THORChain main net channel and just kind of start the voting process, in which case people will start voting. But I can't imagine it being very long. My guess would be sometime either today, even potentially, or next week.
Awesome. Thank you.
Today, whoa.
Well, today to start the process of voting, right? So it probably would not be enabled today unless the voting happened really fast, which maybe that happens. But like probably either today or next week, I'm assuming. We'll see though.
Interfaces are scrambling.
Yeah, interfaces are gonna have to catch up, right? I've actually always maintained this has always been a debate internally of like when we release new features, do we do it in a very like correlated way, and that we just get all the different components like together, right? And then launch it like the UIs, the Midgard stuff, like all the different parts of the stack, and then wait till they're all ready, and then launch it. Or does the core protocol just launch the feature, and then everybody downstream just kind of like adopts it whenever they want to adopt it, and then let the community just kind of figure out their own timing, rather than having like it's like, do you want a synchronous launch or an asynchronous launch? And that's always been a debated topic internally.
Yeah, there's no easy answer there, because if the rollout isn't smooth on the THORChain side, then it affects everything downstream, and it's like any issue just has like multiplicative effects, especially when you take into account like the decentralization of the network. And if like if something happened like consensus failure like today, like let's say like the feature was released with 198 and we were trying to really hype it up and push it, and then all of a sudden there was some kind of major issue that happened, and there's either consensus failure or the feature needs to be paused or something like that, then it just throws a huge wrench into all the coordination that's happened. So I've been, I don't know. There's two ways to think about it, and it's like, all right, well, the coordinated launch that is much more visible to everybody, and especially people that are like only like tangentially in this space and only sometimes pay attention to what's going on in like this sector of things. And then there's like, what if something goes wrong, and like there's upstream problems, problem with THORChain. It's like the interfaces need to adapt. So I think recently I've becoming more to just like, all right, we just push the features, and then like later the interfaces will adapt and update. I feel like that's the better way to do it, just because of the risk of things not always going to plan, because we don't always know what's going to happen once an update or a feature is released with 100% certainty.
Yeah, my viewpoint is I actually agree with you. I actually like the idea of everything just being asynchronous, and the different projects don't require communication or like coming together in some sense, and everybody just kind of does what they do, and then let the market just do it. I'm actually be curious to get Mogarty's perspective on this, because he's from the THORSwap team. Like he's coming from a different angle than I'm coming from, but like to me it makes sense to just like the core just launches some new feature, and then downstream, even if the Midgard stuff isn't done yet, like who cares? Like Midgard can figure it out. Once they do that, then the UIs can figure it out. And once they do that, then like just downstream it like that, and just allow the market just to adopt as they want to, rather than trying to, like, this is not a company. We are not a corporation. We're not releasing a product in the traditional sense. Like, we don't have a marketing scheme really per se. Like, we just do build, launch, innovate, ship that, and then let everything else handle itself downstream.
Yeah, I think like from that kind of PR perspective though, if it was an announcement like, hey, this is live, but then there's nowhere for people to do it yet, then like you'd want to avoid that situation as well, because for the average user, like what they care about is like, hey, can I use the thing? Not can I like send a custom memo and like do some interesting stuff on the back end to like to get into it. But yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense overall, but then maybe the like more public push is once some interfaces have caught up.
Yeah, I think we learned a little bit from the AVAX launch of just like, because we tried to coordinate that launch so much with all the interfaces and have like a coordinated marketing push for it, but then they like all of a sudden something goes wrong and it's like it's another 2 weeks before AVAX is out. It just caused a lot of thrash there, where it's like the THORChain team, Nine Realms and the THORChain Twitter and things are saying like, hey, this is live, and then all of a sudden it's not live, and it's not live for like another 2 weeks or something like that. So I think like going forward, it'll probably be less like announcements from this end of things, like saying like, hey, this feature is like live. It went live like 4 minutes ago. Like everything is like going, and because if something goes wrong, then it just creates this huge like confusion and information problem. So yeah, just something that I was like considering, especially from the AVAX launch, which we that was very, very recent and is on the top of our minds right now. So just yeah, that's what I'm thinking about from my perspective. So yeah, I don't know if there's anything else you guys want to discuss. Unrelated to THORChain, has anyone else noticed that there's like significantly less bots on Twitter now? like one day after the Elon takeover, I don't see any bots in the replies to this tweet. Which there's always like 4 bots that comment exactly after THORChain tweets.
It's bear market, bud. Bear market.
No. This is like yesterday that this happened. I swear to God. Yeah. There's all of a sudden all the bots just, not all the bots, but a lot of the bots have just disappeared all of a sudden.
I get a lot of like messages from scammers on like Telegram saying like, "Oh, I'm from OKX exchange and we want to list you," and it's all horseshit. And so you can almost like you can see like, as when Rune has like a good day in terms of price, like I just get a lot more of those messages in my DMs, and so it's like it becomes a little bit similar to the bots in some sense.
All right, here's a conspiracy theory. Was Elon running the bots to FUD Twitter and get the price down? I don't know. Well, it's I'll leave that as a conspiracy theory. Anything else you guys want to talk about? Oh, in about 2 hours, Eric Voorhees, who's obviously a friend of ours, will be on Bankless with, I guess, debating Sam Bankman-Fried about his new bill. So if anyone's around and you want something to do in about 2 hours, I would check that out. And I'm curious to see what Eric's going to say.
Oh, nice. They're doing it live? I don't know if their podcast is usually live or not. I'm not sure.
Good question. I'm not sure.
But that'll be a good one, man.
Well, yeah, it's like Sam Bankman-Fried in some sense he's really going down like the KYC route or like the government route, regulation stuff. Like he's a lot of work he does. He spends a lot of time in DC and such. And Voorhees is like just is a hardcore like libertarian type guy, right? And so like very different viewpoints of like government and what the role of government is. And so and they're both very smart guys, to be objective. So like it'd be interesting to see the meeting of two smart minds in the industry to talk about an interesting and important topic of regulation.
Yeah, for sure. Anything else you guys want to talk about, or anyone else want to come up and ask about consensus failure, POL, saver vaults?
Yeah, I'm just we can just jump into the Q&A. So anybody's got some questions they want to ask myself or anybody else, welcome to ask.
We have Khan from Delphi.
Hey, how are you guys? On the topic of like asynchronous launch, I just wanted to ask if there's anyone in the audience or speakers from THORswap. I'm curious if like THORswap UI will show like the yield and like the position of savers in when it's like time to launch, or how close that is. Yeah.
Yeah, I can speak to that a bit. Definitely being worked on. With this current timeline, I don't know if we're in a position to make any promises about day one, but yeah, I mean that's definitely all being worked on and definitely all going to be there. Really, like the vision for the UI is just make it as dead simple as possible and not make it feel like liquidity pooling, and really like kind of move away from that sort of language and just have it be simple. Like that's kind of what we've all been dreaming of with this feature since a year and a half ago or whatever. But obviously still having, just the basic information. What did you deposit? What's your yield so far? What's withdrawable? What's the current percent APY? Just simple, big deposit withdraw buttons. Make it really dead simple. And I'm sure over time it'll be on Thor yield too, probably for like a more expanded, in-depth view of everything happening with the position. But yeah, definitely being worked on. Excited to see a really simple interface for it on THORswap.
Yeah, it should be pretty easy because the interface for THORswap to enter and exit is very, very, very simple. It's actually the same memos they're already using with like a single character difference in a literal sense, like literally just a single character difference. And then the yield becomes very easy to calculate because there's no two assets with fluctuating prices on both of them. And instead, you can just say, "Oh, I put in one Bitcoin and now I have 1.1, therefore my yield is 10%." Right? Like it just becomes so. It should be relatively very easy for THORswap or any UIs to kind of like interface with this particular feature. So I can't imagine it taking forever to integrate.
Definitely not. Yeah, I'm sure it'll be really, in the relative scheme of things, really quite quick. But yeah, I don't know if the vote happens today, and like I don't know how quickly things are going to move. Don't want Mogarchy to have a panic attack here. But I'm sure I'm sure we'll get something out.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some room to build like a really nice UI, but it's not just the like the deposit UI and things like that. It's the stuff like tracking, like analytics, like seeing how much yield you have currently and having nice, just a nice UI with that. But also like social things that come with that. Like I think everyone's seen those, like Binance screenshots of like, hey, I'm up like 20% on this like BTC long or something like that. I think it'd be, and I know that Thor Yields like implemented something similar. I haven't really seen them like just out in the wild, but I would love to see those for Savers vaults, especially because I think that's just it's a more tangible thing of being like, hey, I earned 6% on my AVAX saver position or something like that. So,
I think that's a great point. It's way more shareable because the trouble with the dual-sided LP is like your earnings are complicated. It's not really always that straightforward. It's like, oh, my LP versus HODL is up, and it's like, what is that? But if it's just like deposited 1 BTC and now it's 1.03 BTC and it's been 48 days or whatever, just make it like super simple, shareable little cards. Yeah, that'll be cool. I'm sure that'll happen.
So I have a question for Can if he wants to answer me. But so I'm expecting this, like Bitcoin will be obviously the biggest guy in terms of savers, obviously, and I'm expecting that the pools will kind of fill up pretty quickly, and that the yield on the savers will be relatively low, just because market factors. So my question to Can would be like, in your experience, talking to people that you talk to and so forth and so on, like, what do you think is a yield that people are willing to take what's too low that people are not going to take it? So like, where do you expect the yield to end up? Because the free market will determine what people wouldn't take. But like, I'm curious to know what your viewpoint is. Is it like 5%? Is it 1%? Is it 0.5%? Like, how do you view it?
Yeah. So like in any kind of investment, the yield is always like associated with risk, right? Like high risk, high reward kind of mentality that like people have. So I think it ultimately comes to like the magic number. Um, like think about let's think about it this way. Like if the yield is like risk free, everybody should be super happy with having like 2% yield, right? On Bitcoin. And the bottom line here is like I think time. Like I'm not like personally, although I'm like super duper excited about this launch, I'm not expecting anything magical in the first days. I think the key here is like over time, as like THORChain continues to like um, continues to operate without exploits, without like hiccups or like adds like these like additional security measures that have been added in the past, etc. And like in people's minds, it becomes like a safe place to deposit. I think people should. I would expect them to be okay with like 2-3% yield on Bitcoin, which is pretty doable. Um, yeah, but like my objective view is that like there are certainly doubts of like how much risk they're taking, because I'm talking about the platform risk, not the price risk, and that would only like get mitigated over time as people build their confidence, I think.
Right, because the only risk they have to calculate for is the protocol risk, right? Of THORChain having issues or being exploited or whatnot, and not so much they don't really care about price risk because they're already exposed to the price, and so that has no relevance in this mentality.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it is like, I think the challenge there is like if you own Bitcoin on Bitcoin blockchain, like that's pretty much like riskless, in the sense that you don't have actually any platform risk whatsoever, because it's deemed as like the most secure blockchain. And so THORChain is like has a quite complex code. Like although like as a fan I'm like confident in it, not like as an outsiders, like the outsiders can't be like, we can't expect them to be like super comfortable with it unless until like maybe a year passes without like any problems or whatsoever, and like people actually start to earn like and show that they've earned a yield on Bitcoin, etc. So I'm expecting like a gradual thing here. Obviously like my market is cyclic, so like if there's a bull market, like it will like numbers will go up pretty quickly, but generally I think time will be key here.
Yeah, and the other side of the equation where there's so much effort being put in by on the THORSwap side, Nine Realm side, core team side is like the integrations to get the volume up, right? Let's get THORChain powering wallets, dApps, other projects, and like that volume is really what's needed to make the yield available for all these people. Because like if it was just at the current rate, like there's only so many people that can pile into the Bitcoin savers until it's like essentially zero yield, right? So that's like that's the other huge piece of the puzzle is, and where really like the key focus I feel overall is getting just all the getting volume up. You know, that's really like the number one domino to everything else kind of really working and succeeding, and having there be plenty of yield so the single sided savers can really flourish, and there's and it can be like that hit product that people want. So I agree with you. I think, you know, it's like a slow ramp up for both trust and then both for having like plenty of yield to go around to where it can actually be used by tons and tons of people with plenty of liquidity in it.
Yeah, I was just talking to a friend to like today, just explaining how THORChain works and everything, And like the way I kind of like describe the future is that like the sort of, if we think of THORChain as like an exchange, the customer is no longer the user. I think like in future I almost see it like as these AMMs on like these chains, like native AMMs. Like I expect like this DEX aggregation to drive up volumes quite a bit. That's my prediction. Because like in my mind, the biggest challenge for going cross chain is about liability. And like with integrating with THORChain, it's like very easy, because nobody's like that the AMM, as like if an AMM on like Avalanche, like Pangolin, starts to offer Bitcoin as an option to swap, like they're taking no liability whatsoever. Like it goes through THORChain, like they're not taking like any custody or whatever. So it's like pretty easy way for them to offer this. And yeah, so like I'm very curious about how much volume that's going to generate. And then in future, I'm just thinking like probably like the swap flow will come from like these AMMs, and not like individual users actually going through uh, like directly swapping. But yeah, that's my prediction.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as we get more DEX integrations like integrated, like we'll naturally see more volume. And like you could even start to see like ARB bots using THORChain as like a way to close the ARB on other exchanges, which would cause a lot of volume to pass through THORChain, of course. And then in addition to that, like the work that we're doing, especially Nine Realms is doing, where like more integrations with like wallets, like Trust Wallet, for example, like that stuff is going to be also huge and just kind of create a lot more trade volume through the network. And then eventually, I can only like to me the what I see as like the inevitable result is just that THORChain just becomes this like liquidity center for the entire industry that just is passing massive volumes back and forth between chain A to chain B, whatever that direction that is. And of course, all those trading happening on THORChain is going to generate yield for the pools, and therefore for the LPs and for the savers and all these things. So it's like it's all pretty synergistic in a sense.
Cool. Some light questions from the comments here. Can I be your brand ambassador? With no marketing budget, it'll be great to have more people putting the word out to the layman. Yes, you are hereby deemed a brand ambassador. So congratulations. Feel free to be an ambassador to THORChain. Anyone can just go and talk about THORChain. You don't have to be a brand ambassador or anything like that to talk about THORChain. Just be active in the community and talk to people, and you can call yourself a brand ambassador. There you go.
That's how me and you got here, Cow.
Yeah, basically, we just called ourselves brand ambassadors and started doing Twitter Spaces, and now here we are.
CEO of THORChain.
Yeah, if you need support with THORChain, THORWallet, so THORChain is the back end, THORWallet, THORyield, they're all separate entities. They have their own teams. They just use THORChain as to run their own services. So if you're having issues, I would go to one of their Discords, whatever service you're using if you're having problems. So yeah, anything else you guys want to talk about?
LFG.
Yeah, I think we covered it. Let's go.
LFG, another week, boys.
Hopefully next week will be a fun one because we'll hopefully by then have launched Savers, and then we can see the actual activity on chain and see what the drive is like. If there's going to be a lot of drive initially or less drive initially, as Ken was kind of alluding to. I don't know. We'll see, but I'm excited for it.
Sweet. Thanks for coming on, Ken. I'll catch you guys next week. Fridays at noon, and recording will be up on YouTube tonight.
Later, guys.